and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Oh, we're going to kind of bounce around throughout some of the latest news, but I kind of want to start it off with one of the government intrusions that we've had to deal with since 9/11, being TSA. And, you know, I've constantly been critical of TSA and they're, you know, the whole idea that they're going to stop terrorism, or that we need people groping us at the airport because that's the best way to secure us. I don't know, people groping me would be, for me, less secure, not more secure. Now I don't have a right to my own body. Yeah. Just so I can travel? Yeah, I don't see that as protecting us. That's more of a assault upon people. So I've been very critical of TSA and the whole point that the idea that, you know, they're going to save us is a fallacy. It's a fallacy based on, you know, fear, emotion, but not on reality. And I have an article here about an undercover probe that, you know, pulled up a few disturbing things. We'll get to that article from NBCnews.com, but I do want to start off here with the Ron Paul Liberty report that came out a couple days ago about abolishing the TSA. So we'll go ahead and dive right into that. Cue it up here. Okay, here we go.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening to announce that I introduced some legislation today dealing with the calamity that we have found at our airports with TSA. Something has to be done. Everybody's fed up. The people are fed up. The pilots are fed up. I'm fed up. You know, I've come to this floor many times over the past many years and complained about the terrible foreign policy we've had, the terrible monetary policy we've had, the excessive spending and the debt, and also the tax policy. But what we're doing and what we're accepting and putting up with at this airport is so symbolic of us just not standing up and saying enough is enough. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Co-host today, Daniel McAdams, is with me here in Lake Jackson.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Well, doing well, and good to see you. And also, we have a special guest, a friend of ours and a friend of libertarianism. Jim Bovard is here with us. He's been writing about libertarian thinking for a long time. He's a lecturer. He gets a lot of stuff in USA Today. He's a great civil libertarian in particular. Jim, welcome to the Liberty Report.
Hey, Ron, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the chance to join you and Daniel.
Well, very good. And obviously, with that introduction, I think the viewers realize we're going to talk a little bit about TSA, and a little bit of that has been motivated by the disaster approaching here with the mobs that will be at the airports today. And this has been something, of course, that I've agitated about for a long time, especially when those bills were being passed in the Congress. It narrowed down to, and I'm sure you remember, it was narrowed down whether it should be private-run companies under the auspices of the government or the government itself. It wasn't much of a choice because not many of the congressmen were willing to say, well, the responsibility ought to be on the airline. So I know you've kept up with this issue very well, and you've written recently about this. So tell us how frustrated you are. Could you possibly be more frustrated and aggravated by the TSA than I?
Well, personally, I've always tried to be an optimist, but on some subjects it's really difficult. No, it's fascinating. The TSA keeps getting worse. Last year on the campaign trail, Donald Trump called it a total disaster, and a lot of people thought that he'd make it better after that, but he hasn't. It's actually gotten a lot more intrusive thanks to some of the new guidelines TSA is using. And, going back to the question of private versus federal, a huge difference with a private company is that the people searching you, the people following you, would not have the equivalent of diplomatic immunity. It's almost impossible to sue a federal agent who violates your constitutional rights. And that's a huge Pandora's box for not getting abused at the airport, because federal agents, the TSA agents, know that they can, grab you here, squeeze you there, and it's like, tough luck. There was a lawsuit that's coming down. A federal judge just approved it a few months ago. It's an airline pilot who got jammed in the groin, punched in the groin basically, by a TSA agent out of Dulles Airport. And TSA tried to get the federal judge to dismiss his lawsuit. They said his rights were violated. TSA said that instead of filing suit, what the guy could have done is simply called into the TSA contact center and left a complaint. This is the type of remedy the TSA thinks the American people deserve after they get heavily abused by federal agents.
Jim, Daniel has a question for you.
Well, a question and a comment. I flew last weekend, Jim, to D.C. and back. And, I can tell you it's much, much slower. They're taking much more time. But it also seems like there are many more workers, but they're just all milling around, doing nothing. I was lucky because I always opt out. It's very sad because when it first started, you had the chance to opt out. There were quite a few people opting out. Now nobody does. I'm the only one. My kids ask me, why do you do this? I say, because I can at least. I at least still can. But I walked through the metal detector and ding, and the fellow said, well, you've been randomly selected for a search. Is that fine? And I said, no, it's not fine, but I guess you have to do it anyway. And of course, by saying that, I triggered all sorts of people to come over and say he's refusing his search. And, it's just become so ludicrous, Jim.
Yeah, that's a good experience. Some people say the TSA acronym stands for 1,000 standing around. They have all these employees. One of the last times I flew was coming back on Thanksgiving Day 2015 out of Portland, and I had time enough. I got to the airport early, so I opted out. And it was a routine, pat down. And then all of a sudden, the TSA agent said that I triggered their explosive alarm, something on my baggage had. And I said, well, it wasn't like I was hanging out at a missile range or going target shooting. And so I was marched off to a private room, and 3 different TSA agents were there, and one was very, very aggressive and it basically felt like he was trying to turn my family jewels into a pancake. And I filed a complaint about that. I wrote several stories, did a FOIA request. And the thing that probably triggered that, and the thing that's going to get a lot of people hammered today, was that I'd used hand sanitizer before going through the checkpoint. And hand sanitizer has glycerin. And according to the very unreliable tests that TSA uses, that's enough to trigger an explosive alert. I mean, I didn't look like a terrorist. I didn't have any. Well, okay. Some people think I look like a terrorist, but okay, let's put that aside. But I mean, there was no reason to do groin pounding, which is basically what they did on me, and it's something that they'll do. They're probably going to do today to a lot of other people, a lot more worse than what I got, and for no good reason, because you use hand sanitizer, hand cleanser, anything that has glycerin can trigger their stupid explosive alerts, and they have never caught an airline bomber with these explosive tests, but they still use them to march people off and give them the third degree.
You know, Jim, every time they do some testing, TSA comes out very poorly. They don't prevent anything. They cause a lot of trouble. They undermine our liberties. But don't you think it would be reasonable to put them in the category of a security industrial complex? You know, it's money's behind all this. You know, some of this stuff, when it comes out that they're failing their tests, what did the congressman say? Right now, they're saying more equipment, more money. We don't have enough money. We want 3D scanners, and we want CT scanners, and this stuff's expensive. So it has to be that there's money behind this this whole project as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of money, and there's such gross negligence by Congress. I mean, this is the kind of thing that Congress should be marching. You know, there's year after year, TSA grossly fails these undercover tests done by TSA or other federal agencies, and and for a brief period, congressmen piss and moan, and then give them a higher budget. It's almost like every time the TSA screws up, TSA uses that as a pretext to even worse abuse American travelers. This is what's happened with the guidelines this year, which are more intrusive and more intimate. You know, the current guidelines, the new ones, are so extreme that TSA actually warned local police departments to expect people to call up and complain they'd been sexually assaulted after a TSA search. And you have these de facto sexual assaults, and TSA still doesn't find the mock bombs and explosives. And it's disappointing to me to see how many Americans put up with this stuff, because there are folks like Daniel, you and I, who are outspoken and do everything we can to stop this nonsense. But it's interesting chatting people up in TSA lines. There are folks who say, yeah, this is BS. And there's others like, shut up, this is keeping me safe. I'm thinking like, wow, this is, okay, it's no longer 1776.
Jim, you had the piece that Dr. Paul referenced earlier, and we thankfully reprinted it at the Ron Paul Institute website, but it's a great article. It came out perfect timing. This is the biggest travel day of the year. I hope many people read it. But you had, in addition to a couple of horror stories that you told in the piece, there were a couple of bright spots dealing with immunity, losing immunity, and that sort of thing. Maybe you can give us a little bit of hopeful optimism.
Yeah, there was going back to this pilot, James Lindler, who's filed a lawsuit in federal court, and it's actually moving forward because a lot of people tried to sue about these searches, which violate Americans' Fourth Amendment rights to be free from a warrantless and unreasonable search. They filed suit. They've all been dismissed until this one, and this is moving forward. And there was a federal judge who certified it, and the federal judge's initial decision back in July was great because it had such disdain for the arguments that TSA and the Justice Department used. I mean, the federal judge said that no, it's not reasonable for a federal agent to assume that he could get away with, punching a traveler in the groin for no reason. I mean, a reasonable federal agent would know that, TSA was saying. This is a type of mindset that TSA brings to court, and it's a type of mindset that would let almost any agent do almost anything to any American. Mm-hmm. And that's a complete travesty of the Bill of Rights.
as early as the Magna Carta, there was an effort made to make sure the king and the governments were under the same rules and laws that the people were under, which was a very good idea, and it's persisted, and our founders recognize this. But this is what has been totally lost, and hopefully this court case you're talking about will change this, is that individuals, if they would do what we see pictures of, what these TSA agents are doing, I mean, they would be put in prison so fast, and they're totally exempt. And and I don't think anybody can argue that the TSA agents are pure and they're trying to save us from a nuclear attack or something like that. That it's just disgraceful what we tolerate. But I did want to ask you one thing about this groin searching. I doubt if they ever found any type of a weapon by groin searches. Are you aware of anything that, my goodness, it's a good thing that we do groin searches, because guess what we were able to save us ourselves from?
I'm not aware of any kind of anything that they have found that was worthwhile looking for. There was a case in Denver, the TSA in Denver. There were a couple of gay agents there who were, set up a system which they could, if some guy was traveling who they thought was attractive, they would trigger a false alert and then take him aside and kind of, enjoy pawing him. It's interesting to think, going back to what you said about the rule of law and equal treatment, if Donald Trump had to go through the typical TSA line twice a week, TSA would not survive his tweets for 2 weeks because he would feel, okay, this is BS and I'm going to put a stop to it. And Trump does have sufficient authority that he could yank in the reins hard on this agency. He hasn't done it. And at this point, it's his responsibility. This is BS that was started by George Bush, made worse by Obama. But now it's Trump's responsibility. And lots of the commenters of the USA Today article were very angry at me for blaming Trump on this, but he's president.
Right.
This is the bottom line, Jim, and this is from your article. You point this out to anyone who says, "Oh, but they're making us safer." This is it. The Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General appeared before Congress, as you write, and he said that the screeners failed to detect mock threats. I think he said in the neighborhood of 80% of the time. So they're not keeping us safer, right?
Well, it could be worse. It could be 85. No, I mean, this is what's happened again and again. There was a test by the IG Inspector General, I think, in 2015. It came out that they'd failed 95% of the time, and so TSA invoked its failures to become far more intrusive and punitive to American citizens who are traveling. And that's what's happening this year, and it's still failing 80%. And so much of what TSA does makes no sense at all. And this is an agency which is both a farce and a menace. And it's important for people not to bow down simply because the TSA agents have snappy uniforms with those epaulets on the shoulder, which the taxpayers paid for, and now they're supposed to bow down to.
Well, you were talking about what percentage have they been correct on, 75, 85, 90% on these tests. And obviously, they're not very good at it. They're failing too often. But one thing that they're very good at is they're 100% on the side of saying a violation of liberties. It always violates the personal liberties. And I think this comes from, you might comment on this, is what the role of government ought to be. This is making the assumption that the government's role is mainly to make us very, very safe, completely 100% safe. And the chairman of the committee and the Congress said, that is our goal. That's why we need more money and more equipment. We have to have 100% safety. Now, it would be great that we do, but there's no proof. There's actually proof that the opposite works. When you depend on the government, you're less safe. If you depend on the ownership and the responsibility on the company, I keep using as a reference here where we live. We live just a couple miles from huge chemical plants, and they're very secure because it's private. But depending on government to make us 100% safe, I think is the mistake that leads to all these other mistakes that the politicians make, and even the people. go along with it, especially after 9/11. And Daniel remembers it. We would get calls. Ron has to give in a little bit because we have to give up our safety. We have to give up our liberties to be safe.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And unfortunately, there's no one who's going to make Americans safe from TSA agents.
There you go.
But going back to that period after 9/11, I have memories of some of the speeches you gave on the House floor. I mean, I think that was your finest hour. And it was great that you stood up. And it was great that, there's someone in Congress, aside from some of the hardcore leftist types who were very good on civil liberties sometimes, someone aside from them was standing up from a principled constitutional side. Another point I've made, and it's really pissed people off about as far as making airports and airlines safe, is the thing that's happened is the U.S. government is far more effective at making enemies than at protecting the American people. If we had a less interventionist foreign policy, we would have much fewer threats here at home.
We'll need to wind this down now, but I think Daniel has one more comment or a question for you.
Yeah, just a final one, and that's amen to that last point, Jim, for sure. But I don't know if you're that comfortable commenting on this, but, as I mentioned when we started, there are less people that are opting out, less people are challenging it. You see people in the line, it's just like drones, they know what's coming. And what can we do you think, to wake people up, to get them in the spirit of resisting this again?
Well, I don't know if you're good at magic tricks. No, I mean, this is a question I wrestle with my writing in general for a long time. It's like, it seems as if the BS from the federal government and the brazen abuses of Americans' rights has become clearer and clearer almost every year, and there's been no real, fundamental pushback. There's some individuals, some groups, this, that, and the other, and it does make me wonder how many Americans still give a damn about individual liberty. But flip side is that TSA makes it obvious what happens when if people don't have rights and liberty. What happens is you're doing a simple trip, and then you get federal agents squeezing your butts and your boobs for no good reason.
Like you, Jim, I look for places where we can be a little bit optimistic, but I am thinking to myself as we face these kind of problems that if the people don't wake up and do something about the TSA being so symbolic and so many people exposed to this might shift me over to thinking, well, I guess I better take a period of time of pessimism until we renew this interest in liberty. But, Jim, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. And if you have a final comment, and also a place where our viewers can get in touch with you, and whether or not you have a website.
Yeah, website is www.jimbovard, that's BOVARD.com. I'm on Twitter at Jim Bovard, and if you search Google News, you'll probably see some recent articles and lots of people who hate my stuff.
Well, once again, thank you very much for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that.
All right. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us today, and please come back soon to the Liberty Report.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe. And I have an article here covering the whole TSA failures. And this one's from NBCnews.com. Disturbing undercover probe found TSA screeners missing mini test weapons. And this was November 8th that this was posted. It says here, undercover tests have found Transportation Security Administration screeners failed to detect test weapons at a high rate. According to sources, findings that one congressional committee chairman called disturbing. Members of the House Committee on Homeland Security were given details about security vulnerabilities by Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General and the TSA. Sorry. Said here, in a classified briefing on Wednesday, quite frankly, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we found that briefing disturbing. Committee Chairman Representative Michael McCall, Republican from Texas, said in a hearing following the briefing. The rate of failure was not disclosed at the public meeting, but congressional government sources with knowledge of the report said it was high. We take the OIG's findings very seriously and are implementing measures that will improve screening effectiveness at checkpoints, TSA Administrator David Pekoski said in a statement. We are focused on staying ahead of a dynamic threat to aviation with continued investment in the workforce, enhanced procedures, and new technologies. Pekoski, who was just sworn in August, said in a statement. The TSA said in the statement that the classified briefing was to discuss the results of the most recent OIG covert testing at airport security checkpoints. In 2015, the then acting head of TSA, Melvin Caraway, was reassigned after an internal investigation by the Department of Homeland Security found screening failures at dozens of the nation's busiest airports. Screeners did not detect 95% of test items in that investigation. The breaches allowed undercover investigators to smuggle weapons, fake explosives, and other contraband through numerous checkpoints. The briefing and committee hearing on Wednesday came 9 days after a terrorist attack in New York City involving a truck left 8 people dead. The suspect allegedly told investigators he was motivated by videos from the terror group Islamic State. McCall called America's aviation sector the crown jewel of terrorist targets and said America's enemies only have to be right once while we have to be right 100%. Pekoski told congressional members that the agency is prototyping 2 CT scan systems at checkpoints right now. The devices are already used for checked bags. That could give screeners greater ability to identify suspicious substances. He said the devices would be a significant enhancement over devices currently used at checkpoints. The devices have been used for checked bags but not checkpoints because they were too large and heavy for checkpoints until recently, Pekoski said. The prototype systems are in Phoenix and Boston, he said. Pekoski said that to invest in CT technology requires funding above TSA currently has, but the agency wasn't on the path to CT development at checkpoints when the budget was developed, so the program wasn't reviewed for investment. Committee member Representative William Keating, Democrat from Massachusetts, noted that $1.28 billion being charged to the public through surcharges is being taken away for deficit reduction. Certainly, additional investment would make travelers, whether they're Americans or people visiting our country, safer, Pekoski said. Pekoski also acknowledged that poor morale at the TSA continues to be a challenge. Ranking committee member Representative Beanie Thompson, Democrat from Mississippi, said at the hearing that it has constantly struggled with low morale across the workforce, ranking 303 out of 305 government agencies in 2016. So they fail, so let's throw more money at the problem isn't your technology. The problem isn't your screening procedures. Morale, yeah, that might play a factor in it because the idea is a failure. this is the number one target of the target of terrorists is easy targets. You see that no matter where you go. You put security at airports. You put security at national monuments in whatever country you're in. What do, they just run a vehicle and take it down a sidewalk. And I think airlines would be like, yeah, I really don't want to be known for the airline that constantly, is taken over by terrorists. And I think the airport, would you would find more morale. I believe that, the people working for the airline want to make sure that their airline is a secure airline. Because guess what? Most of them actually travel on those airlines. When you work for the airline, you're able to travel on those airlines. So I'm pretty sure they would have a little bit more incentive making sure their airline's safe. It's getting to a point, though, if you look at society, they point out, less people are opting out. No one really stands up against it anymore. Conditioning. And when you would have the airport taking care, or the airlines taking care of the security, I see that they're not going to lose patience. They're happy as long as their airline's secure. They're happy that no one's attacking them. Where really the goal of the TSA is to catch that terrorist. You gotta get them. Gotta get them. And well, they're not getting anyone. It's like playing a video game that you can't ever get to the next level because you're playing level 1 over and over and over. It never ends. There's no accomplishment. And a lot of it goes back to training. And why do you think people get harassed? They get bored. They want to do these other type of measures and random. It's almost like the random selection is one of those deals where it's them trying to give the TSA agents a little treat, here you go, get that, to try to keep them motivated. But it's just the whole idea of it is a failure. So now everybody's less secure because they don't have a right to their own body anymore. Just for their right to travel, they lose their right to their body. So now everyone's less secure because now they don't have that right. In the name of keeping them secure. And if you really think about it, what does that remind you of? That's government treating you like a little child. That's something that, a parent or a teacher in elementary school would do to the class, if this person acts out anymore. No one will get to do this. Treating you like a child. You're being punished for others' insecurities, or because you have one bad apple, or even a 1 or 0.1% bad apple out there. Everybody suffers because of it. That's not American. The whole idea of freedom is that other people's choices and mistakes are not yours to take the punishment for. I'm not saying people might not suffer because of another person's mistake, but then you can't turn around after that and then punish others that had no involvement. You can't punish the victim. If there's a terrorist attack against America by some outside force, we're victims of that. And their answer is to punish the victim. That seems a little absurd to me. I don't, that's not freedom. And you constantly see failure after failure by the TSA. And they're constantly rewarded for their failure. Given more money, more technology. How about this? You're not needed anymore. Let the airports, the airlines take care of this. Okay, we're going to move on here. I have one here from We Are Change. Okay. Sorry. This is Twitter and the state's battle against your liberty. And we'll get into this after this clip here.
Show where I strive to be what the news actually should be, focusing on information that actually affects us and bring awareness to the issues that actually matter to our lives and to the lives of other people on this planet, trying to make you think about issues outside of the box and not along political lines, since most news out there right now is being used to divide and conquer society, while at the same time making an appeal to authority while disregarding the truth. And screw those people. So that's why in this video we're going to talk about the old concept known as freedom, which is being eviscerated and wiped off from human society, social media companies now becoming the thought police, an update on the horrible sexual abusers and pedophiles in the upper echelons of our society, and of course the latest on war and all the human suffering happening on this planet right now. So, yeah. Okay, let's just do this. And I think one of the most puzzling stories that came out this week is Twitter announcing that they will now judge verified users' offline behavior in order to judge if prominent people on their social media platform are able to be verified or even use Twitter. And this is right after Twitter just de-verified and even banned people who are considered either on the right or far right. And now they announced that they are going to go and review all verified accounts, over 250,000 of them, not explaining what a review would actually mean and what it even considers offline behavior. So pretty much Twitter will now spy on you on and off of its website to make sure that you're complying with their very vague terms and services, or really just the bigger political agenda that they have, before they decide to censor you or de-verify you off their platform. And what Twitter is really doing here is really insane. Because of the popularity of this social media platform, many people see it as a public utility, especially for breaking news and world events. And some of the people that they either censored or de-verified, I even completely disagree with, and I find completely repugnant. But to progress society forward, we can't just censor the voices we don't like, especially on a public platform, for Twitter's hypocritical political agenda, because if it begins here, any idea that challenges the status quo will be next. And now in other news of big companies just doing what the hell they want, the U.S. Senate just voted and approved a law that makes sure you can't sue your bank or credit card company anymore. Now, of course, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence broke the tie and approved this resolution when the vote came down to a 50-50 outcome in the Senate, and is now being expected to be signed by U.S. President Donald Trump, repealing consumer protection laws, ensuring that consumers can no longer bring class action lawsuits, of course, against the very ethical, honest, and upright credit card companies and big banks. While at the same time, the Senate just passed a law called, very ironically, the USA Liberty Act, which actually destroys personal liberty and allows the government to now warrantlessly spy on you. And of course, search your private data without a warrant. And with the government virtually knowing everything about you and your online activity, why not just give them your DNA? Oh wait, that's actually happening right now, as the police could now request and get your DNA without your knowledge or consent via websites like Ancestry and 23andMe. So in this next part, I'm going to try to cover more articles in a quicker way, so make sure you pay attention to the screen. But ultimately, we live in a country where in the name of liberty, the government wants to know everything you're doing, have your DNA on hand, as police officers break down your door and raid your house for hibiscus plants to fight a failing war on drugs, where the mainstream media lies to you about these drugs in favor of the pharmaceutical industrial complex that keeps them running. A place where professors who are teaching a critical thinking course get in trouble and are censored by higher learning institutions, universities, for making their students critically think too much, where major financial institutions like JP Morgan and Chase tell you that decentralized online cryptocurrencies are money laundering, while they break the law and commit money laundering themselves. All the while, the government gives them a slap on the wrist, takes our money, and even puts us in more debt so we could blow up more ish around the world and then rebuild it, all in the name of a failing war on terror that is creating more terrorism. So yeah, that's happening. And in more failed war on terror news, we of course got the news many Pentagon officials recently declared that ISIS has been defeated inside of Syria, but yet for some reason the United States is still saying that they intend to remain in that country, where initially the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel supported the rebel groups, which have turned out to be radical Islamic terrorists, armed them, financed them, and allowed them to prosper in that region in their greater geopolitical goal of getting rid of Bashar al-Assad, which they have failed to do so. I digress, but this next story is becoming more and more difficult to cover with just how horrible it is, because it is mainly the relationship that the United States has with Saudi Arabia and them working together in a coalition which is fueling war crimes that are happening right now in Yemen. Something that even the U.S. House of Representatives, our Congress, voted and passed a resolution saying that the U.S. military assistance to Saudi Arabia and its war in Yemen is not authorized under legislation passed by Congress to fight terrorism or invade Iraq. And it's not, but this is the justification that Obama and now Donald Trump are using in order to help Saudi Arabia commit horrible, massive, just utterly inhumane acts inside of Yemen right now, where officially the United States is aligned with the side that is linked to Sunni Wahhabists and Al-Qaeda, going against the Iranian-linked Houthi rebels in that country, ultimately a proxy war that is causing mass human suffering. War crimes are being committed. Barrel bombs are being dropped on schools and hospitals and on other civilian infrastructure, causing around 20 million people in Yemen to need humanitarian assistance to just their basic needs. And a lot of people in the supposed alternative media won't tell you this, but this is all being done with the approval and signing off of Donald Trump. Now, the House resolution that was passed is non-binding, which means it doesn't do jack. Just like the United Nations, where 3 agencies are now urging the Saudi-led coalition, which is the United States and the United Kingdom, to lift the current blockade they have in that country, not allowing humanitarian aid to be received, where already 7 million people are facing famine and a cholera epidemic that could wipe out close to 1 million people. The situation is so bad right now that on average 130 kids die every single day in Yemen. Innocent children who aren't guilty of anything except for being born in the wrong place in this world. And it's staggering. While all of this is happening, this suffering is continuing and expanding while the U.S. mainstream media doesn't even tell you that the United States is directly involved in this. And so aren't a lot of alternative media figures because they don't want to criticize Donald Trump. And I'm sorry, on this issue, he is completely and utterly wrong. Not just that it's completely immoral and wrong, but the fact that he's aligning himself with Al-Qaeda on this and Sunni Wahhabism, which directly contradicts everything that he says he is doing. Seeing some of the images that are coming out of Yemen right now are definitely not for the faint of heart, and seeing this being done by our president with our taxes is just utterly infuriating, especially with the mainstream media making sure you never hear about that fact. The left totally ignores it because of microaggressions, while people on the right just bury their heads in sand, forget about all the promises that Trump was making when he was campaigning, and totally decide to ignore this issue and not hold Donald Trump accountable because they're worried that they're going to lose some fans in the process. Maybe I'm being too emotional, but this has really struck a nerve with me. Am I being too hyperbolic? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to your feedback. But continuing on, the United States and the Trump administration still are seeking to bolster Saudi Arabia in their greater push for war with Iran and Hezbollah, where many experts are seeing Saudi Arabia as the aggressor that Hezbollah is mainly located in. Israel said, screw it, we're just going to start firing tank rounds on the Syrian government, which of course violated the 1974 ceasefire. Not the first time, by the way. This time in another clear move trying to escalate the situation. And since, ISIS is mainly defeated because of Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, Syria, and all these other countries that you don't know about inside of Syria, well, Trump still has to keep the bombs dropping, so we're bombing Somalia now, as President Trump accelerates drone strikes inside of Somalia and more airstrikes inside of Iraq, which the U.S. mainstream media, in this instance, 31 more times more civilians were killed than what was originally reported. And I don't know about you, but I don't like innocent civilians being murdered by robotic death flying machines. But that's just me. And while all this illegal activity happens, there's no one court-martialed, there's no one held accountable for their illegal actions, there's no justice. But when a U.S. Navy official decides to draw a penis in the sky, he's going to be held accountable. He's going to get in trouble. Drawing a penis in the sky, killing innocent civilians. It just seems like the scales of justice are just a little bit off. And while all of this happens, why not just give a $53 billion deal in Pentagon supplies and enrich one of the largest corporations out there, Amazon? And in correlation with other very strange purchases made by the U.S. military, we of course have yet another update on the pedophiles and sexual predators in the upper echelons of our society, to which now total to 86 people so far who have been accused of harassment, molestation, rape, and pedophilia. Yeah, that's a lot of people. And while all of this happens, cultural influencers like Leah Dunham, who previously tweeted that women don't lie about rape, just started defending her friend that has been accused of rape. By the way, this is the same Leah Dunham that many people forget in her own book admitted to inappropriately fondling her younger sister, bribed her with candy, and exploited her for her own supposed, quote, sexual exploration. Just a little bit of information you should know on top of this story. And with all these scandals happening, we're seeing more people just totally break their moral compass and just decide to play political hot potato with all these latest allegations that are coming out. Like the Huffington Post that just deleted an article claiming that U.S. Senator Al Franken's accuser was framing him. An article, of course, that he promptly deleted because, yet again, it shows people's double standards, completely destroying their morals and civility in order to push a political power play. And as I've been saying before, this shouldn't be a left and right issue, just the wrong and right one, especially after people are able to fact check and make sure people aren't falsely accusing each other. And it's not just the Democrats that are in hot water. We also have just now a former Oklahoma state senator that has agreed to plead guilty to child sex trafficking offenses. Another just awful, disgusting story of horrible people being in government, abusing their power, and just being horrible individuals. What a surprise. And now an eighth woman came out against former President George H.W. Bush, the former criminal CIA director, and has yet accused him of groping her like he did all the other 7 women that accused him of the same thing. And I think after the 8th accuser comes out, I think there's a very solid case here. But don't listen to me, I'm the crazy conspiracy theorist. And these stories just go on and on, showing you how powerful people and institutions are able to get away with horrible, evil, demonic, criminal behavior only because of their power and influence. But now, because of the internet, as it's slowly being wiped clean and soft censored, we still, and I believe this deep down, have the opportunity to combat all of that money and power with simple truth and sharing honest information that resonates with you the most. And it's a huge uphill battle, but we've seen things done on the internet that previously before would never be humanly possible, with being able to share information in the moment as it happens and then completely change the world because of that information. And that's why it's very important for that information to be free, uncensored, unfiltered, and be decided on by the people and not the kakistocracy. If you agree, share this message with people who you think should hear it. Understand that your actions have power, and if it wasn't for you watching, listening, subscribing, donating, I totally wouldn't be here, and I only am because of you. And that's why I always end my broadcast by saying, I love you. Thank you again so much for watching.
We are change.org, and we are change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, you see the media playing with, the whole, we're going to make up excuses, We'll pander to the people on the left and, make up excuses for them. But the people on the right, oh my gosh, how bad are they? Charlie Rose being, exception. But then, they kind of play like, I don't know, it's so unbelievable that's not who I know. And, it's one of those deals that I even question every one of them, even if it's someone on the left, which people pretty sure they know how I feel about most people on the left right now. But I feel basically the same about the people on the right, for exception of a few. But when you look at the whole deal, it seems like the excuses that are made up, or the misdirections and all that, there might be some valid points brought up in that, but they don't make those same points for people on the right, people that they disagree with. And with the left being so, or the media being so controlled by the left, it's always hitting the right. Now, if the media was truly independent of, all that, it would actually be investigated more. Not only the accused, but the accusers would equally be, how reliable is this source and how reliable is the accused. there would probably be, special reports, breaking, we found the bank statement that shows that, so and so had a nice wire transfer this amount of money right before they came out. You might have a little bit of journalistic investigation going on there, but we're not seeing that. That's not what the mainstream media does. And you got to take all the accusations, because we can't just go, oh, they're accused, so they're guilty. These are serious accusations, and we're basically, you look at the careers of everyone being accused, and it really seems more like a war. And I brought up one point before. You know the extent of where this goes and how far it goes, definitely into the child, trafficking rings that go on, and how deep that goes. If there was real, accusers coming out, you would see more of some of the child molestation type stuff coming out. But it seems to be very targeted. And what that means to me is there's some type of operation going on. There's someone that's behind the scenes targeting people to get them out. So you really still got to take all this with a very large grain of salt. You can't just say they're guilty just because they're accused, even if, hey, there's a lot of them that I'm like, yeah, they probably are guilty. But there has to be evidence, not just the accusation. And when you got, what is her name, Gloria Albright, or whoever that female lawyer is, that, they're always have to make sure they're in the picture when they're, have someone speaking out at some type of press conference. Look at me, that really makes me kind of question a lot of it. She seems way too much of an opportunist and not a, let's get real justice. Okay, let me try to. Now, there was one from Breitbart after endorsing Democrat in Alabama. Bezos, Washington Post plans to hit Roy Moore with allegations of inappropriate relations with teenagers. Judge slam smear campaign. Update after this Breitbart news piece, the Washington Post released its story. Birmingham, Alabama, the Washington Post is imminently planning to run a piece targeting Judge Roy Moore, claiming that he engaged in inappropriate conduct with 4 teenage girls 34 years ago. The alleged incidents, all of which Moore strongly denies, allegedly took place between 1977 and 82. Breitbart News obtained details of the forthcoming Post story from the newspaper's letter detailing the allegations sent to Moore's campaign for comment. These allegations are completely false and are a desperate political attack by the National Democratic Party and the Washington Post on this campaign, Moore said in a statement obtained by Breitbart News. Separately, Moore's campaign said in a statement, "This garbage is the very definition of fake news and intentional defamation." The campaign pointed out that Moore has been married to his wife Kayla for nearly 33 years and has 4 children and 5 grandchildren. It also noted that Moore has served in public office in the past and that no such allegations were previously made. The statement said the judge has been a candidate in 4 hotly contested statewide political contests, twice as a gubernatorial candidate and twice as a candidate for Chief Justice. He has been a 3-time candidate for local office, and he has been a national figure in 2 groundbreaking judicial fights over religious liberty and traditional marriage. After over 40 years of public service, if any of these allegations were true, they surely would have been made public long before now, the statement continued. The forthcoming Post story centers on the record interviews with 4 women who claim that when they were teenagers and Moore was in his 30s, he attempted to court them or that he dated them. One claims that he engaged in sexual conduct while she was below the age of consent. The current age of consent in Alabama is 16. Breitbart News is holding back the names of the 4 women. One of the women was 18 when she claimed that she went on several dates with Moore. The charge in the claim is that when they went to a local pizzeria, Moore ordered wine, even though the woman was 1 year younger than the legal drinking age in Alabama. The woman is not cited making any claims of inappropriate sexual conduct. Another woman says when she was 17, Moore was 34. They openly dated each other in the spring of '81. This woman also is not cited making any claims of inappropriate sexual conduct. In fact, she characterized Moore as being romantic, reading poetry to her, and playing the guitar. The woman is cited saying that physical contact only involved kissing and did not progress any further. A third woman claims that when she was working at a local mall as a Santa's helper when she was 14, Moore approached her. She claims he asked her to go on dates when she was 16, but that her mother would not allow it. The most serious allegation comes from a woman who claims that Moore engaged in sex acts with her when she was 14. According to the Post characterization, she first encountered Moore outside an Etowah County courtroom in February of '79 when she was 14 years old. According to Post characterization obtained by Breitbart News, the woman and her mother told the Post on the record that Moore offered to look after name redacted while the mother was inside the courtroom attending a hearing. Name redacted says Moore asked her phone number and soon called her. Name redacted says Moore picked her up around the corner from her mother's house and drove her to his house about 30 minutes away. It continued. She was on her first visit. He kissed and hugged her. She says on the second visit he removed his clothing except for his underwear, removed her shirt and pants, and touched her through her bra and underwear. She says he guided her hand to touch his underwear. She says that Moore was aware that she was 14. She says that on one visit Moore gave her alcohol. The woman told the Post that she informed her mother of the alleged incident in the 90s. The Post is owned by Nash Holdings, LLC, a holding company for billionaire Amazon founder and open borders champion Jeffrey Bezos. The newspaper formerly endorsed Moore's Democratic opponent Doug Jones in the Senate race. In a series of articles, Breitbart News has documented Jones' close association with far-left groups financed by George Soros that push open borders and a host of radical causes. Now, again, what kind of proof? Now we have one with a mother saying that, she was told about it. But again, I don't know the background of these people. I don't know, have they came across any financial gain? People are like, they're so insensitive. Why would you ask questions like that? Blah, blah, blah. Because you have to. Because just taking someone's word for it is not a reliable justification for, convicting someone of a crime. So, you kind of have to have some type of moral standing when it comes to that. Now, I do want to kind of move on from that. I have one here that I want to get into. And this one, sorry, issue here. Get going. This one has to do with what Stefan Molyneux is calling a culture collapse in Canada, and saying prepare yourself accordingly. And the neighbors to the north, it's one of those deals that in certain areas of Canada, they share some of the same cultures that we share here in America. And you'll find that, when you go out west. You find the cattle drivers. Well, you go, out west in Canada, you find the same thing. You'll find some of that in, Alaska. There's a lot of shared culture. What I like to say is, Canada and, the United States, their flyover country shares a lot of the same traits. There's a lot of that, more rural, rustic, a little old school mixed with new school type atmosphere. Small towns, the humble, atmosphere that you see. It's not that, that coastal type atmosphere. When you get east, west, some of down south or on the coast, you have a different type of atmosphere. And, flyover nation is a different type of atmosphere. And it's definitely forgotten by media for the most part. Media has slowly tried to almost kind of make it look like just rednecks and hillbillies. And they've actually tried to make that into something cool, which now, you have people that, if you go back in their family, they were not raised to be, hillbillies. Just because they lived in the country and they farmed and all that, they weren't raised to be hillbillies. But now you're having actual, people that want to, be a redneck or a hillbilly. Whatever, floats your boat, do what you want. But, the media has helped try to spur that. You have, some country music, which there's a lot of country artists that, they don't know a lot about country. being country. They might have came from down south, but they might have been raised in a city, or they might have moved, to the south or out west and to start their music career in country. I look at mainstream, country music, and kind of my eyes starts twitching. I'm like, this is country now, Frank Burr, go mudding. Okay. That's pretty stereotypical. Maybe like the farming, being more in tune with your farming. Oh, my tractor drives itself. I know what I'm doing half the time. I just, pour the seed in and go. So, let's go ahead and get into this. Stefan Molyneux, culture collapse in Canada. Prepare yourself accordingly.
Windsor, Ontario is not that far from where I live, and a Windsor man has been sentenced in connection with an indecent act committed last year at the downtown aquatic center. Hussein Al-Hariri pleaded guilty last month to the May 2016 incident. Now, that's a long time to deal with this kind of stuff. I mean, the arteries of the legal system are so clogged, it feels like society's having this collective heart attack of delayed justice. Now, the defense for the guy said, give him a conditional discharge. He's 38 years old, but the judge didn't believe that would be in the public's best interest. So the judge gave Al-Hariri a suspended sentence and 24 months of probation. So no jail time, I don't think any fine, 24 months of probation. No word as to whether he's going to go into a sexual offenders database. So the man, Al-Hariri, pleaded guilty to assault and an indecent act because he was caught masturbating in the shower area of the Windsor International Aquatic and Training Center. This is back in May 2016. Now, this is the way that it is reported in the media, and I quote, "He was also seen giving a young person a consensual back massage." Now, whenever I see those kinds of vaguey, weaselly words, well, I put on my deer hunter's cap, clamp my pipe between my lips, and do about a 12-second web search. Found out what actually is meant by giving a young person a consensual back massage. So there was the masturbation. When he was investigated, there had been a separate incident. So this guy, and now this is from back in the day, allegedly approached a 15-year-old male and engaged in physical contact that officers deemed sexual in nature. Approached, right? He approached a 15-year-old male and engaged in physical contact that officers deemed sexual in nature. Now, he pleaded guilty to the assault, if this is what is being talked about, and I assume that it is. What does that mean? Well, you see, it's a young person. It's a 15-year-old male. Do you know what they're not calling this person? A child. The age of consent in Canada is 16, as far as I know. And if you are engaging in contact deemed sexual in nature with a 15-year-old, isn't that child sexual assault? Isn't that some kind of pedophilia? I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that there's quite a lot of weasel words going on here. One only has to wonder if it was, say, a 38-year-old white male with a young black child, whether all of these weasel words and obfuscating language would be used. Now, in Canada, if you commit an indecent act in public, in the presence of one or more persons, then you can go to jail for a maximal penalty that goes from 6 months to 2 years. So he got zero of that. Now, this guy, Al-Hariri, a 37-year-old Syrian refugee, who came to Canada about 3 months prior to masturbating and sexually touching a child. And the defense is, he has PTSD, he doesn't communicate with his family in Syria, he lost 2 of his brothers in the conflict there. So is this the new thing? That you can masturbate and sexually touch children, you masturbate in public and sexually touch children if you've been traumatized. Now, he has a permanent resident status in Canada. Obviously, this doesn't mean any kind of deportation. The claim is that he has no prior criminal record. I don't know how you know that, because I don't think that a lot of detailed files have been kept in Syria. I don't really think that they flew over to Syria into what could be a war zone to find out what kind of history this guy had. So, no prior criminal record. You mean in the 3 months in Canada? Oh, but don't worry, his lawyer says he's extremely remorseful. So that's good. You just sorry? Now, his lawyer, the guy's lawyer, she said, well, what happened in the shower area, it wasn't sexual in nature. It was kind of like a cultural issue. A cultural issue. I don't... Oh, my God. Okay. Lots of people from the third world are coming to the West. You know what can't happen? It can't be that they're not subject to the law as much because of culture. Because then what we're not talking about is multiculturalism. We're talking about multilegalism, which is a very different matter. Multiculturalism isn't, hey, great music. Love that kebab. Shawarmas are fantastic. And I guess I can see my way clear to boiling snails in butter and calling it delectable. But if we're going to start talking about multilegalism, that because of an ethnic or cultural or religious background, the laws may be different, that needs to be discussed up front. That is not something you get to just slide in the back. Sorry to use the analogy. This is not something where, well, we can bring in all these different cultures, and then the legal system's going to have to fragment like a smashed mirror. It's going to have to fragment because there are all these cultural differences. And is this, this argument from a legal standpoint that sexually assaulting a child, as I see it, masturbating in public, in view of people, that's a cultural issue? Is she saying that that's somehow the Syrian culture as a whole? But that seems like kind of an important discussion to have before bringing lots of Syrians into your country, don't you think? It seems like kind of an important issue if you're going to say that the Syrians, and I assume this guy's Muslim, because 85% of Syrians are, I'm going to assume that you'd want to have that discussion ahead of time. We're not having this discussion. But this is brought up as a legal defense. That is very significant. That is very significant. Did it have an effect on the judge's decision? I don't know. But the fact that it comes up as a defense is really important. Because if this had been some white guy, some guy from Timmins, Ontario, some guy with grub boots, a lumberjacket, bit of stubble, and a mullet, you know what his lawyer would not have been able to say? Sure, he masturbated in public and sexually touched a child, but it's a cultural issue. Never would have happened. Never would have happened. And I really want to set up a flare here because this cannot happen. You cannot bring up cultural issues to fragment the legal system. Or, if that's what you want to do, let's have a discussion about it ahead of time. Want to bring all these people in wherein there's going to be this cultural defense for public masturbation and sexually touching children? So that the law can be much more lax on them? Is that what you want? You like taking your kids to a swimming pool or not? But this, bring the people in and then start using this cultural issue as a legal defense? Well, that seems like kind of putting the cart in front of the horse. Don't you think? Just a little bit. Now, of course, the judge says, well, the public has a right and needs to feel safe in public institutions, and that makes sense. So under the term of al-Hariri's probation, he is not to communicate with the victim or attend any public swimming pool or facility. He also has to go to counseling and provide a DNA sample. To counseling. So, if counseling cures a proclivity to touch children, I think you better inform the counselors, because as far as I understand it, there is no cure for that proclivity. So, remember this language. Consensual massage of a young person, although if he's 15 and the age of consent is 16, I fail to see how it can be consensual. Isn't that the whole point of the age of consent? Tell me if I'm wrong. Compare that language with how the media describes a man charged with sexual assaults at the West Edmonton Mall water park early in 2017. Now, this guy is going to go to trial at some point, maybe in 2018. So it could be 2 or more years before this guy goes to trial. Is there any way, any conceivable way to speed any of this up, or all the lawyers just want to keep making money, right? So, this is the report, and I quote, "A trial date has been set for the man accused of sexually assaulting several young girls at the West Edmonton Mall water park earlier this year." Ah, look at that difference. Now, I don't know what he did. But according to the reports, the girls are all teenagers under the age of 16. So pretty much in the age category, in many ways, of the boy who was molested by the Syrian refugee in Windsor. Now, it's consensual massage. He's a 15-year-old male, but here, same age category, sexually assaulting several young girls. Ooh. Can you really feel the misandry? Can you just feel and taste the male disposability and the absolute lack of sympathy, if not downright cover-up, for the male victim of this kind of assault? So the guy in the West Edmonton Mall water park, Saliman Haj, has pleaded not guilty to the charges. He was charged in February after the Edmonton police alleged that he inappropriately touched 6 young girls while they were playing at the water park. He is a Syrian refugee and father of 6. So he's charged with 6 counts of sexual assault and 6 counts of sexual interference. Again, I don't know the difference. I don't know what he did to these girls, but it just strikes me as a very different way of discussing it and of handling it. The language is different. The intensity is different. And I wonder if the charges seem very different. And I wonder what's going to happen in terms of sentencing. Do we place a higher value on our girls than our boys? I think that it's pretty clear, at least in the language, that we do, because we have inappropriate touching of a 15-year-old male versus sexually assaulting young girls. Roughly the same age. Could be the same age, we don't know. But teenagers under the age of 16, so 13, 14, 15. Within that age range. So this is a warning sign. A warning sign for Canada as a whole, I believe. And the warning sign is this idea that somebody from Syria has a cultural defense against sexual norms in Canada. That is a very, very important, it's a watershed moment, I think, in Canadian society. Multicultural is one thing. Multilegal is entirely different and needs to be resisted with all the strength that a culture possesses, such as it is, in my opinion. We fought in the West for thousands of years to have nobody excluded from the general rule of law. We took the kings and the aristocrats and we submerged them into the general sea of objective legality. We took the priests. We invited women in. We got rid of slavery. We tried to make a universal, common system of law, and that has been one of the great achievements of Western society. Now, the great multicultural experiment that has been going on for a little bit more than half a century has, in Europe, fragmented into no-go zones, into private court systems, into parallel legal systems, and that is a big challenge. And that is not a direction a society, I believe, can sustainably go. Do I have sympathy for people who have come out of a war zone? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. And it is because I have sympathy for people who come out of a war zone that they must be subject to the rule of law. You know, the whole point of what happened in Syria is that the rule of law broke down. There is very little rule of law in war zones in Syria. And so if you want to escape a war zone and come to a country, one of the things you're escaping is no rule of law, no objective law. To come to a country and to value that arrival, to profit from that arrival, you must come to a country with an objective rule of law. It cannot fragment according to culture. It cannot fragment according to religion. Free speech is free speech. Sexual indiscretion is sexual indiscretion. Molestation is molestation. Because if you go to a country, you are subject to the laws of that country. If you don't know that, I'm not sure how you're going to flourish in that country. If I am going to move to Japan, I'm going to study the laws of Japan. I'm going to read up on the laws of Japan. I'm going to maybe talk to a lawyer, whatever. So I know what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I don't end up spitting my gum on the ground in Singapore. I know it's not in Japan. Go with me. And end up being caned publicly. Because I'm not into that. Privately, it's another story. So this wave of people coming in to the West, we must be able to hold firm in our objective, universal standards of law. This cultural defense should be considered anathema. I believe. It should be considered anathema because it is the tip of the sword, it's the thin edge of the wedge that can crack the legal system and fundamentally undo a country. The country is what? The country is a universality of government and legal dominion over a particular geographical area. And if that legal system cracks because cultural norms change the way things go, you are setting yourself up for an enormous amount of conflict that is unnecessary and incredibly unhelpful. People have fled the third world because the rule of law is not upheld. It is no way to welcome people to crumble the rule of law, which is the great differentiator between the countries they came from and the countries that they're in. We must hold firm to the objective rule of law and not give way to cultural concerns. Or there is a very real possibility that over time we will end up in a similar position to the countries they fled from. And that we cannot accept.
And that was Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Check him out, subscribe. He puts out pretty good videos. Don't always agree with him on everything, but the thing I already see is here in the United States and Canada, that rule of law has been broken down a long time ago. Here in the United States, the constitutional law that should basically govern any law created under the Constitution, under the, so-called constitutional government, it's been broken apart. It's been ripped. It's been burned. It's been edited. Edited by changing definitions. Same thing that the left is constantly trying to do with gun rights. Twist what it means. And you can see that in left-leaning textbooks that are coming out. Where basically they're telling them it's only the right of militiamen, which is now, the army, or, the military, or police. Which is untrue. Definitely, if you here in Indiana, you just look up militia in the state constitution. But the deal is there's a bigger power at play. I think Soros plays a big part in it, but there's a lot of other groups that are playing a part in this. And you can tell it's a global power, move. Because it's not just happening in Canada. It's not, just happening in the United States until Trump hit, restrictions on it, which have been back and forth in the courts. But it's happening in Germany. It's happening in France. It's happening, in England. It's happening, all around Europe. So what does it mean when it's happening all over there? And it's happening here, overseas? We got oceans dividing us, and it's happening here just, maybe a little slower pace than it was over there, but it's, happening here too. That signals some type of power move that's a global power move. And, we've talked about, a new world order, and of course, oh, that's conspiracy theory, but it's playing out, and I think it's very hard to deny what's going on right now. Now, when you look at a lot of what's going on militarily, it kind of shows you dividing lines around the world, Iran, Russia, China, a lot of these other groups that are all working together, and then you have, the EU, all of Europe basically, and United States and Canada. It really still seems like there's a World War III brewing. I think under Trump, because of how he interacts with people, I think it's been slowed down, but it's still growing. When they were talking about Saudi Arabia earlier, and attacking Yemen, and the United States being behind that, and they're attacking, one sect of a Muslim group, and we're backing one of the most radical sects of the Muslim religion. The ones that commit the acts that we apparently are trying to get rid of those type of people, but then we back those type of people. Now, I've always said, a lot of that will play into the oil, and unless we can really open up our abilities here, which I think need to be done safely, but we need to have the ability to do it. if you're willing to have another country do it, then you should be willing to, do it yourself too. So if we could do that, then that might help us if, we have to align against Saudi Arabia for so, whatever reason. What if they turn their back on us, we can't rely on them for oil, so maybe we should get independent from them so we don't have to align for that reason. Okay, give me a second here. Now, we have one state in particular, California, that is extremely left-leaning. And I had this short clip from Reason. You can check them out, reason.com. Claiming LA is creating traffic jams to push commuters to ride bikes and rail. I want to play this short clip and kind of speak on this
here. You mess with traffic, you have messed with the DNA of Southern California.
It just created gridlock through our town pretty much all hours of the day.
It all comes from the same agenda. Get you out of your car.
We're in Playa del Rey at the shack, the site of a lot of angry people who live in the neighborhood, upset over the stupid, I even hate this phrase, road diet.
Here in this quiet beach community just outside Los Angeles, residents went to war with the city back in July over traffic. It all started when the Los Angeles City Council imposed what it calls a road diet, meaning lanes of traffic were removed in favor of building new bike lanes and adding space for parking. Some locals applauded the changes.
I was really pleased to hear that they would be slowing down the traffic through here.
But commuters were furious.
We only have 3 roads that connect us from the South Bay to the West Side. So when the city came and they halved the capacity of 2 of these roads, it really just created havoc for us.
John Russo is a local resident who co-founded Keep LA Moving, a community coalition that's fighting back against the city's unilateral decision to reconfigure the streets in a way that's choking the flow of traffic.
This was basically done without any community input. Like, most of Playa del Rey didn't know this was happening. It created just huge backup, huge gridlock in the mornings. Like, what was a 10-minute drive was turned into a half an hour. So it literally crushed our local businesses. There was a group of 62 businesses that were surveyed, and across the board, business was down, from to the restaurants to the coffee shop. I mean, even like people you wouldn't expect, like the dentist. The dentist lost customers.
It's part of a strategy known as Vision Zero, in which the city aims to eliminate all traffic-related fatalities by 2025. The thinking is that eliminating car lanes will slow traffic, meaning fewer accidents. The goal is also to incentivize more commuters to bike to work.
In order to achieve 0 deaths, public officials have been doing some odd things.
Farouk Feigenbaum is the Assistant Director of Transportation Policy at the Reason Foundation.
Road diets are used as what I would call solutionism, whereas anywhere there is a safety issue, we're going to put in a road diet and it's going to solve the problem. It's not really based on science, and it's not really based on empirical findings.
So after the road diets were put in, we actually saw traffic accidents go through the roof. We had an average of 11.6 accidents per year on these roads in Playa del Rey. We've had 52 accidents in the last 4 months. So we're over 400% of the yearly average in just 4 months. Emergency vehicles couldn't get into town. I mean, we have video of ambulances out there on Culver, sirens blazing, just sitting in traffic because no one can pull over anymore. There's no place for the people, the cars to go to let the response vehicles through.
According to 2013 census data, just over 1% of Los Angeles' commuters bike to work. 67% of commuters drive.
You're taking something from a whole bunch of people just to benefit a few people. That's not a good cost-benefit analysis.
What better way to force people out of their cars except make traffic so unbearable you don't want to sit in your car anymore?
City planners also hope to incentivize residents to move closer to their jobs, or if they do have to commute, to ride the city's public transit system. Los Angeles has the third largest transit network in the country, yet only 10% of commuters use it to get to work.
In Los Angeles, a majority of the folks simply cannot get from their home to their job in a short period of time using transit, and it's not an option. And so trying to force people into one type of behavior doesn't tend to work, and it's why even in Los Angeles, the vast majority of people are still commuting by automobile.
In October, the Los Angeles City Council reversed itself in Playa del Rey after community members filed 2 lawsuits against the city and launched a recall election of local councilman Mike Bonin, who had backed the plan. But the city is still planning to implement over 40 road diet projects in other areas of Los Angeles. And Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, and Atlanta are pursuing similar policies.
In the 1960s, we were building interstate highways, freeways through downtown areas, which was definitely the wrong approach. Nobody is suggesting we go back to that. But now we seem to be on the total opposite end of the pendulum, where we don't want to build any roads at all. We just want to build bike paths. We want to narrow lanes. We're saying that transit is going to solve everybody's needs. Neither extreme is what we need to do.
I just think this is completely wrong. It's not about cyclists versus drivers. These are all of our roads, and they should be safe for all users. And the road diet didn't make our roads safer, and they're not making it better for the cyclists.
Reason.com, Reason TV on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, I'll add another city to that I know is kind of going down that route, Fort Wayne, Indiana. They've been, implementing bike paths. They're putting bike paths through dangerous areas. They'll have parking, then a bike path, and then the street, and the bike path is maybe, 2.5, 3 feet wide. Little stripe line, people opening their doors to the cars because they have to park, on the side of the road. And they're, then you get the people that are into the fabs, you know them because they're the ones that go out, buy like the most expensive bike. They get the whole, uniform going, the special helmets, and you see them riding their bike looking like, a kid learning how to ride their bike, and they're in their 40s. Like, they jumped on that bandwagon, be a bicyclist now, it's cool. We gotta be cool. Like, it's kind of weird to watch. But, you get a lot of that. Well, the problem is a lot of these people, don't know what they're doing. They will just kind of swerve out in the lanes of traffic and put themselves and others in danger. All over these fabs that are being pushed by politicians and people making a lot of money, and pushing these agendas where, you should move to this little apartment next to your job instead of living in that house, in the suburbs or in the rural area. You shouldn't, drive to work. That's bad for the environment. So we're going to tell you, you can't drive into town. You got to park your car outside of town and ride a bicycle to work. Well, no, I don't know because screw you, I quit. And there's a lot of issues I have with the urban culture and what, the cities tend to promote and foster. I'm not a big fan. Now, I have other people that are like, they can't move away from the city. They have to be around people. That's just not me. I don't have to be around people. I want people to hang out with, but I'm not desperate for it to the point that I'm going to live in the city for it. I got plenty of friends that will drive, out here in the middle of nowhere and come hang out, so I'm good. It's one of those deals, though, that's the type of environment that they tend to foster. Is we're going to tell you what type of life to live. We're going to tell you what to do. We're going to tell you what to believe. Oh, you don't think global warming's right, true or whatever, and you're not on board with getting rid of cars. Well, guess what? We're getting rid of cars anyways, and you're going to have to deal with this. No, I think that goes against freedom. So I tend not to like that type of fostering. But these bike lanes have definitely gotten dangerous for drivers and bikers and even pedestrians walking across the street or getting out of their car. Then they tend to use that for other purposes too, which I've noticed outside of Fort Wayne. A lot of these organizations that you find out, they're connected to United Nations or other organizations that are connected to the United Nations. And what they do is they'll put these bike paths through, and sometimes they even, will take people's property. But they'll put these bike paths through and then go, oh yeah, and by the way, while we were putting that bike path through, tearing up, land and, actually building, bike paths on property, then they claim the property, right next to it's wetlands. Well, you did put a concrete, structure right here, and it basically dammed maybe flow of water out of areas. Well, it's wetlands, even though it's your property, you can't do nothing to it because they want a scenic route for their bike path. They're abridging people's rights, and Fort Wayne, and then Allen County outside of Fort Wayne, in other cities, and in the rural areas, those bike paths are going up, and they're also going down roads, and they're endangering people's lives, and they're really kind of almost more of a safety issue in other words too, because you get people that want to ride them later at night or walk them later at night, and these bike paths do go through a little bit kind of scenic and hidden areas, just make it perfect targets for people to snatch or kidnap people, and it's just not there's paths like that everywhere. You go to parks and stuff like that. We don't need to make infrastructure out of it. Basically a hidden highway, and that's basically another thing that they've done by doing this. Okay, let's see where we are on this time here. We are getting to the end of the broadcast. Let me see how long this our clip was. I wanted to play it, but I don't know if we'll have time. Which, if we don't have time, that's okay too. Why is it going so slow all of a sudden here? We'll get it though. Yeah, that's probably going to be too long. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get through that. Okay, I'll save that for another time. article over here didn't crash. This one was from Reason.com. I'll cover this real quick. 8 really bad laws that just went into effect. Every year, thousands of new laws go into effect across the country. On October 1st, states use the start of the fiscal year to begin enforcing these laws. A sobering number of these laws will turn out to be bad. Federal agencies and even some foreign countries reveal in imposing all new manner of unnecessary authority today. On this day, for example, the United Arab Emirates started levying a 100% excise tax on products like tobacco and energy drinks and 50% for soda today. There are such worse laws than that. There are 8 of the worst going into effect today around the country and around the world. Touching your phone in Oregon. From this day forward, Oregon drivers are prohibited from touching their cell phones while operating their vehicles, except to make a single swipe intended to turn a phone off. While lawmakers passed a prohibition to make it easier for cops to enforce cell phone and driving laws, the single swipe exception is surely to muddy that. The law will apply to cell phones, tablets, and GPS devices, but not for police officers, of course. You don't want to hurt anybody else, just answer a simple text, Officer Jeremy Shaw told Kobe 5. Gummy bear marijuana banned in Colorado as of today. Gummy bears, chocolate bunnies, and other playful-shaped marijuana edibles are banned in Colorado, where recreational marijuana has been legal since 2014. Despite a steep drop in teenage marijuana use after legalization, the state assembly continues to harbor misguided idea that it needs to ban adult products to protect children. There is no evidence children hunger for marijuana edibles. Nevertheless, the new law is specific and wide-ranging in its ban on edible marijuana-infused products in the shape of a human, animal, or fruit, including shapes that resemble or contain characteristics of a realistic or fictional human, animal, or fruit, including artistic, caricature, or cartoon renderings. You'll still be able to purchase plain-looking edibles. The law clarifying that edibles in geometric shapes and simply fruit-flavored are not considered fruit and are permissible. Cell phone tracking in Connecticut. Among the 140 laws going into effect in Connecticut today, one aims to regulate cell phone tracking by police agencies. Unfortunately, the law gives cops too much discretion to use the cell site simulator devices that make cell phone tracking possible. Specifically, the law permits police to use such devices for 48 hours without a court order during exigent circumstances, despite it not taking nearly that long to obtain a warrant, even in an exigent circumstance, and for 2 weeks under an ex parte court order, which means police don't have to notify anyone about the tracking. Legislators are also brought in use of cell phone simulators to intercept communications under states' wiretap laws, allowing prosecutors to ask a 3-judge panel to issue ex parte wiretap orders for them. Enhanced sentencing for crimes against first responders in Nevada. Enhanced penalties kick in today for hate crimes committed against first responders, including police, firefighters, because they are first responders. Criminals convicted of such crimes can face between 1 and 20 years in prison on top of the sentence for the crime. The enhancement at least can't exceed the length of the original sentence. Critics of hate crime laws have been warning since 1990s that hate crimes which rely on the speech of a suspect for proof would end up being used by those in power to punish speech offense to them. Last year, Louisiana became the first state to make killing a cop a hate crime. Momentum, meanwhile, is growing for a federal version of such a Blue Lives Matter law. And why you think that's going on in Nevada? Just think about it. We've covered, out there in Nevada. After a fracking ban in Maryland after a 2-year moratorium, Maryland this year passed a complete ban on fracking, which goes into effect today. The law is not based on sound science, but on rank fear-mongering. A 2015 study from Yale found that fracking does not contaminate drinking water. A popular bugaboo for fracking opponents, the Environmental Protection Agency also found fracking had a negligible effect on drinking water. Other lies about fracking have also helped to motivate opposition to fracking. Fracking does not make it possible to light your drinking water on fire. Fracking fluid can't seep into groundwater and poison your tap. Fracking doesn't increase air pollution. It doesn't cause cancer. And the natural gas freed by fracking is decidedly better than coal. Unfortunately, Maryland is the latest but unlikely the last place where hysteria has won over science. And I don't know, if all that's true. So I will say that I do have a few worries about some of the fracking that does go on. What they're using for their fluids that they're pumping in the ground and stuff. Continue education for cosmetologists. The Maryland General Assembly should take a collective bow for making it twice on its list. A new law in effect today gives the State Board of Cosmetologists, yes, there is such thing for people who do makeup professionally, the authority to require most cosmetologists to complete continuing education classes to renew their license. At least 33 states and the District of Columbia require cosmetologists to be licensed, often requiring more than 1,000 hours of training. To qualify, Maryland requires 1,500 or a 2-year apprenticeship, which requires a license of its own. Remove your electronics and prepare for pat-down. Starting today, the TSA will require all passengers to go through security screening to remove any electronics larger than a cell phone from their bags and place them in separate bins. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly announced the new regulations in June, prompted by reports that terrorists were now capable of hiding bombs in large electronics. Finally, our wait is over. A 4-month delay in implementation seems excessive if the threat was dire as the DHS suggested. Bitcoin surveillance. Japan legalized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin in April, and today all cryptocurrency exchanges must be registered with the country's financial services agency. So there's 8 laws that went into effect. You can read all of it there at reason.com. 8 really bad laws that just went into effect. And there's laws that are still on the book, like when you can take a shower, how many days out of the week you're allowed to take a shower or a bath or whatever. The amount of crazy laws that are on the book are enormous. And the thing is, they don't get rid of them. They just add more dumb laws to the books. What does that do? Well, it makes everyone a criminal. That's what dumb laws do. Because even if they're not enforced, they could be one day. And you could be on the receiving end of that. And to be on the receiving end of that, when it starts becoming authoritarian power grabs, where they start going up, you broke this law. Well, that law, no one ever follows that law. It hasn't been followed since, when was it made? 1800 or something. Well, too bad it's still on the book. They're going to use it. That's what I always worry about when they keep doing this, making more and more dumb laws, even when they don't enforce it. It's like, well, they're not enforcing it, so it can't be too bad. Well, no, because it could be enforced later on down the road. And then vague laws where they can just, change the definition of what that law means, having vague terms in it, and that becomes another dangerous type of law. But I think most laws anymore are all dangerous. But I want to thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV. Great broadcast coming up after this. And don't forget, go UCY.TV. Click the Amazon tab at the bottom. Shop Amazon through UCY.TV. And UCY gets a little kickback to help cover operating costs. Thank you again. And again, stay tuned here on UCY. And